Let's take a step back and examine a curious phenomenon among one of Earth's most ancient creatures, the lobster. Female lobsters, particularly when they enter the maternal stages of their life cycle, engage in fierce territorial disputes themselves. But what's even more fascinating is their strategy for selecting a mate. Rather than evaluating each potential suitor individually, a process that would require immense cognitive resources, they rely on a kind of evolutionary outsourcing. They observe the social hierarchy among males and simply focus their attention on the victor, the one who has already demonstrated his competence in the brutal, competitive world of lobster conflict. Now, that's no minor observation. This is a pattern of behavior deeply embedded in biology, and it's not just lobsters. You see this in birds, in primates, and yes, most provocatively, in humans. It's a form of biological economization. Female delegates the burdensome task of mate selection to the hierarchy itself. Let the males battle it out, socially, physically, politically, and the pecking order will reveal who's most capable, most dominant, most fit. Then she simply selects from the top tier. It's the logic of selection through delegation, an archetypal strategy spanning millions of years. Think of it like the stock market. A single individual doesn't determine the price of a stock. Rather, it's the collective competition and interaction of all participants that arrives at a consensus valuation. The dominance hierarchy works the same way. Instead of doing all the individual computation themselves, the females let the social system, refined over evolutionary time, do the hard work of sorting competence from incompetence. Now, when the female lobster is ready, biologically and behaviorally, to mate, her entire demeanor changes. She becomes more passive in conflict, softens up literally, shedding her exoskeleton, and emits chemical signals that attract the attention of the dominant male. These signals are essentially olfactory invitations to intimacy. But here's the twist. The dominant male is, by his very nature, aggressive, irritable, and territorial. His victories have been forged through conflict, so it's not a simple matter to shift his attention from war to romance. He's not primed for tenderness. However, if the female's approach is calibrated correctly, if her cues are compelling enough, his behavior transforms. He changes from a warrior into a more careful, attentive participant in the mating ritual. This dance between strength and vulnerability, dominance and receptivity, echoes through the mythological frameworks of countless human stories. You see it in Beauty and the Beast. You see it in the psychological undertones of something like 50 Shades of Grey, which, regardless of what one thinks of its literary merit, speaks deeply to the feminine archetypal attraction to power tempered by empathy. That's not trivial, that's ancient. Now we might think of brute strength as the ultimate arbiter of dominance, but this is a simplification. Franz de Waal, a renowned primatologist, has shown convincingly that even in chimpanzee societies, long-term power isn't sustained through violence alone. A tyrannical male, no matter how strong, is vulnerable to coalitions formed by those beneath him. 2 or 3 less dominant males working together can topple a despot. Therefore, successful alpha males, the ones who stay at the top, cultivate alliances. They build trust. They pay attention to the infants and females of the group. They understand reciprocity, even in a brutal hierarchy. This is politics, not just force, and it's millions of years old. Baby kissing, in a very real sense, predates civilization, but lobsters, well, they're not chimps. Their social structures are far more primitive. They operate within a narrower bandwidth of behavior. So for them, the sheer narrative of dominance and submission, strength and softness is sufficient. After the successful seduction, the female, now completely vulnerable without her shell, allows the male to fertilize her eggs. She remains in proximity, waiting for her shell to harden again, regaining her defensive capability. Then she returns to her own territory, carrying the fertilized eggs. The cycle begins anew as another female approaches the dominant male with her own suite of chemical invitations. The dominant male gets the prime territory, the best resources, and disproportionately, the mating opportunities. Success begets more success. In lobster terms, dominance is destiny. Now, why does this matter? Why should we care about the dating rituals of crustaceans? Because the underlying principle, that of the dominance hierarchy, is unimaginably ancient. Lobsters have existed in something resembling their current form for over 350 million years. To put that in perspective, the dinosaurs, those mythical monsters of Earth's deep past, only showed up 65 million years ago. Lobsters have watched them rise and fall. In terms of evolutionary time, the lobster is not a footnote. It is a foundation that tells us something crucial. The dominance hierarchy is not a social construct invented by humans. It is a biological reality built into the structure of life itself. The nervous system, even in these primitive animals, contains specialized circuits that register status, competition, victory, and defeat. Those same structures, though more complex, exist in us. Your ability to function socially, to regulate mood, to pursue goals, is tied to the same neural substrates that guide a lobster's struggle for dominance. This is not metaphor, this is biology, and if the dominance hierarchy is that ancient, then it's not merely a cultural preference. It's a condition of existence itself, one that has shaped the brain, the body, and the behavior of every complex creature on this planet, including you. The nature of nature, chaos, order, and the ancient dance of being, one of the great insights of modern biology, and a truth that carries deep philosophical weight, is that evolution is not a radical process of reinvention. It is fundamentally conservative. When something evolves, it does not discard the old entirely. Instead, it builds atop existing structures, preserving what works while layering in gradual refinements. Evolution is an editor, not a revolutionary. This is why the skeletal blueprint of a bat's wing, a human hand, and a whale's fin are strikingly similar. They share the same number of bones, arranged in similar patterns. Why? Because life doesn't start from scratch, it adapts what's already functional and reliable. The mechanisms that drive evolution, variation, and natural selection are elegant in their simplicity and vast in their complexity. Variations arise through the shuffling of genes and the random effects of mutation. Over time, nature sifts through these variants, selecting those best suited to survive and reproduce. But this raises a critical, often overlooked question: what exactly is this nature that does the selecting? What is the environment to which creatures must adapt? We often act as if nature is a fixed backdrop, a static stage upon which the drama of life unfolds. But that's an illusion. The environment isn't a neutral observer, it's an active participant. It changes, it evolves, it influences, and is influenced in turn. Reality, in its full expression, is not stable. It is both structured and unpredictable, ordered and chaotic. This duality is profoundly captured by the Taoist concept of yin and yang, the twin forces of chaos and order, forever locked in a cyclical interplay. The symbol, a circle containing a black serpent with a white dot and a white serpent with a black dot, shows that even within order chaos lurks, and within chaos the seed of order resides. This insight is ancient and wise. Nothing is so predictable that it won't eventually change, and nothing is so random that it cannot stabilize. This matters deeply when we consider natural selection. Selection implies judgment. It assumes that certain traits are better in a given context, but if we mistakenly believe that context, the environment, is eternally stable, we fall into the trap of thinking that evolution is a ladder, with each rung bringing us closer to some perfect final form. That's a relic of Victorian thinking, the idea that man stands at the summit of a grand evolutionary hierarchy, crowned by intelligence and reason. It flatters us, but it distorts the truth. Nature doesn't aim for perfection. It aims for survival under changing conditions. Traits that are advantageous today may be liabilities tomorrow. Success in life is less about moving toward a fixed ideal and more about participating in an ongoing, often perilous dance with shifting circumstances. The Red Queen in Through the Looking Glass said it best: you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. That's evolution, that's life, and nature's complexity doesn't end there. While some parts of the world change rapidly, weather patterns, disease outbreaks, political unrest, other elements move at a glacial pace. Forests evolve more slowly than individual trees. Trees grow and decay more slowly than leaves. This layered tempo allows evolution to conserve core structures even while it experiments on the periphery. Chaos nested within order, within deeper chaos again. This nesting is precisely what allows life to persist. If everything changed at once, no creature could keep up. Ironically, the more enduring something is, the harder it is to see. Our eyes fixate on movement, on the shimmering leaves, and overlook the ancient tree. The tree may blind us to the larger forest, and some of the most essential features of life, like dominance hierarchies, are nearly invisible altogether, yet they exert immense influence over every social creature, including us. Many people today, especially those insulated by modern technology and urban comforts, project romantic fantasies onto nature. They imagine the environment as a pastoral paradise, harmonious, balanced, nurturing. Artists depict it as a place of serenity. Activists revere it as sacred and pure, but that's a dangerous illusion. Nature is not just butterflies and sunsets. It's also parasites, pandemics, and starvation. It's malaria and crocodiles and cancer. Nature will kill you as easily as it feeds you. This isn't an argument against environmentalism. It's a plea for realism. We build homes, cities, and systems not because we hate nature, but because we are trying to survive it. Nature is not our friend. It is the arena in which we strive, and often fail. If Mother Nature has a personality, it is indifferent at best and malevolent at worst. To live is to stand against entropy, to impose structure on chaos. This leads us to a final misconception, the false division between nature and culture. Many believe that human societies and institutions are unnatural, a deviation from the true order of things, but culture is just nature at a higher level of abstraction. It is evolved, shaped, and selected by the same principles. The longer a tradition or structure persists, the more it reflects something real, something adaptive. Take the dominance hierarchy. It is not a human invention. It is not capitalism or communism. It is not the patriarchy or the elite. It is far older than any economic or political ideology. Lobsters, creatures that predate trees, exhibit dominance structures. They fight for territory. They position themselves in social ranks. Their behavior and the neurochemistry that drives it mirrors ours in startling ways. In fact, the very part of the human brain that tracks our social standing is deeply ancient. It governs how we perceive ourselves, how we feel, how we act. When we rise in status, we walk taller, think clearer, and respond to life with optimism. When we fall, we slump, withdraw, and experience the world as threatening. These aren't merely emotional reactions, they're neurochemical consequences. Consider serotonin. In lobsters, it regulates posture and aggression. High-status lobsters have more serotonin, and so do high-status humans. Low serotonin correlates with anxiety, illness, and vulnerability. When we lose repeatedly, chronically, our brain chemistry changes. We become prone to depression. We doubt ourselves. We expect the worst. And ironically, that very mindset makes it harder to rise again. So, dominance hierarchies are not arbitrary social constructs. They are embedded into the very architecture of life. They are real, stable, and profoundly influential. They are not isms or ideologies. They are manifestations of the rules of being. And because of that, we must treat them with the seriousness they deserve. We must understand that culture is not separate from nature. It is its extension. We must accept that life is not fair, that nature is not kind, and that chaos is ever present. But we must also recognize our capacity to stand against that chaos, to organize ourselves, to take responsibility, to climb upward despite the odds. That's what it means to be alive. That's the burden, and the glory of being. Top and bottom, the unseen algorithm of status deep beneath the surface of your conscious mind lies an ancient mechanism, an implicit allocator of status, embedded in your brain long before your thoughts about yourself or the world. You might think of it metaphorically as a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 representing the apex of social standing and 10 the abyss. If you find yourself at the pinnacle, the 1, your life is saturated with privilege. If you're male, for instance, this translates to elite housing, superior nutrition, unwavering social deference, and a steady stream of romantic or sexual opportunities. You are, in essence, the lobster at the peak of the dominance ladder, possessive of territory, with potential mates staking their claims. But if you're female and occupy that top spot, you command a similar sphere of influence, solely via soft power. Your suitors are impressive, physically symmetrical, morally upright, dependable. You too engage actively in competition, not likely through physical confrontation, but through subtle verbal finesse, strategic defamation, and calculated social maneuvering. You guard or elevate your standing in the hierarchy with equal ferocity. Conversely, lie near the bottom, the 10, and a different world unfolds. Your living conditions are meager, your food subpar, your company faint or absent. Health declines, mental strain escalates, romantic prospects vanish. Life becomes a struggle, and death a kind companion. Even if money finds its way into your hands, it can be more curse than blessing. With it comes temptation of drugs, alcohol, and the attraction of predators who feast upon vulnerability. The lower rungs of society are perilous in a way the upper echelons can hardly comprehend. This primordial counter within your brain gauges how others treat you, how they value you, and translates it into your neurochemistry. If you're judged unworthy, the system restricts the release of serotonin, heightening your emotional sensitivity. You become physically and psychologically reactive. That responsiveness is adaptive, though. It protects you in your precarious reality. You must be ready for emergencies because life at the bottom rarely grants a moment's peace. Yet this constant state of hypervigilance isn't benign. It devours resources. It is stress, not in an abstract psychological sense, but as a real bioenergetic toll. You burn through your reserves to stay alert, to brace for threats, to prepare for danger that may never manifest. You live as though you're driving with both the accelerator and brake floored. That's unsustainable. Over time, your immune function weakens, your capacity to store energy is diminished, and impulsivity rules. You chase pleasure, any pleasure, even if it compromises your long-term prospects, or your ethics, or your legality. The future dims in the face of the immediate. In contrast, someone positioned higher in the social hierarchy benefits from a vastly different calculation. The brain's primordial circuit assumes safety, that your niche is stable, your social support's intact. It senses less risk. Any change becomes potential opportunity rather than danger. Serotonin surges. You walk with calm purpose, standing upright. Vigilance recedes, confidence rises, hope for the future becomes realistic. You're no longer grasping for crumbs, because you expect the banquet to return. Delayed gratification becomes feasible. Reliability, planning, and long-term investment become rational, even appealing. In practical terms, when you're secure, you act with foresight. You invest in your health, your relationships, your own competence. You cultivate trust. You rebuild and reinforce your world because your internal ledger says tomorrow will likely be better, not worse. Deep beneath your conscious mind lies an ancient regulator, a pre-reptilian counter, tasked with assessing your viability, status, and well-being. But this system, so finely tuned, can malfunction under certain conditions. Irregular sleep or erratic eating can disrupt its function. Uncertainty and inconsistency, those enemies of order, throw it off its rhythm. Imagine a symphony where every section must harmonize perfectly. The moment one instrument misfires, noise erupts. That's why routine matters. We anchor ourselves through repetition. Habits become automatonic. They shed complexity, yielding reliability and calm. Think of how small children transform when their schedules falter. A once playful and joyful child morphs into a whiny and fractious one when sleep and meals lose predictability. It's a visceral demonstration of how essential structure is to psychological stability. So in my clinical practice, the first question I ask is, do you wake up at a consistent time every morning? This question matters more than regularity of bedtime. Waking uniformly helps anchor our circadian rhythm. Without that rhythmic foundation, treating anxiety or depression is like building on quicksand. Our neurochemical systems that regulate negative emotion depend on predictable sleep cycles. Next, I ask about breakfast. It should be hearty, high in protein and fats, and consumed soon after waking. Why? Simple sugars create a whirl of spikes and crashes in blood glucose, destabilizing mood. For someone already entrenched in anxiety or depression, these swings can devastate stability. Their systems are primed to overreact if challenged on an empty stomach. An insulin surge after an overnight fast can drive glucose down precipitously, leaving the person hypoglycemic and emotionally volatile. The rest of that day remains caught in the shadow of that metabolic chaos. Consistent sleep and a proper breakfast, often simple interventions, can dramatically stabilize patients, yet other pernicious patterns emerge through more insidious routes. They arise from positive feedback loop systems in which a small input gets amplified, reverberates back as another amplified output, and escalates until it becomes pathological. Picture a sound system with a feedback screech. The microphone picks up sound from the speaker, and the loop quickly intensifies to ear-splitting volume, capable of destroying equipment. Human life, of course, contains far more fragile systems. Take alcohol addiction. Someone might drink a few strong drinks and feel euphoria as blood alcohol rises, but once it peaks and begins to fall, withdrawal and toxin buildup set in, spiking anxiety. To chase the fading warmth, they drink more. And then wake up hungover, and perhaps ingest again to cure the hangover. This, tragically, is a textbook feedback loop. The attempted cure becomes the cause, and addiction spirals. Or consider agoraphobia. Often beginning with a panic episode triggered by a heart palpitation or life stress, that panic triggers more anxiety, short, shallow breaths lowering carbon dioxide tolerance, increasing physiological arousal, which intensifies panic, a full feedback spiral. Once panic forms in a place like a mall, the individual avoids it next time, and that avoidance only proves to the ancient fear system that the mall is dangerous. The brain marks it as off-limits. Soon, it's not just the mall, it's the supermarket, public transport, then perhaps the outside altogether. Retreat shrinks the world, and the brain's feedback system mistakenly believes that cautious withdrawal is wise, as it confirms perceived danger rather than dispelling it. Depression too often functions this way. Feeling useless leads to withdrawal, which produces more isolation, reinforcing feelings of worthlessness. Emotion deepens and withdrawal accelerates feedback. Worse yet, those who endured bullying or trauma in youth may carry not the objective scars, but physiological imprints, missive posturing, hypervigilance, anxiety, that persists long past the threat's end. Even when they objectively thrive, elevated stress and diminished confidence remain. And that can invite renewed negative attention from others, even in adulthood, creating yet another feedback loop, this time social. A prior trauma triggers a physiological habit of subordination, which attracts contempt or aggression, perpetuating the cycle. In every case, the principle stands clear. The ancient part of your brain that sets your inner regulator responds not just to external events but to internal ones. When that system misfires, through lifestyle instability, feedback loops, trauma, or physiological dysregulation, the mind falters, suffering ensues. The remedy lies in restoring systems, regular sleep, predictable routines, stable nourishment, safe social engagement. These are the foundations of recovery, not romantic notions of healing, but hardwired frameworks of order. Rising up, the courage to resist subjugation at times, individuals become targets of bullying not merely because they're physically weaker, but because they lack the will to push back. Consider children. A 6-year-old, no matter how assertive, is vulnerable when faced with a 9-year-old. The imbalance vanishes to a degree in adulthood, thanks to more equal physical development, and the real-world consequences for attacking another grow up. However, the root of aggression doesn't always lie in strength. Often, the individuals who are bullied are those who tolerate it, empathetic, self-sacrificing souls who respond to malevolence with passivity. Those who respond with tears and submission are especially vulnerable. Worse yet are those who, believing all anger, even the impulse toward self-defense is immoral, suppress such impulses entirely. Their upbringing might include overbearing, authoritarian parents, from whom they learn that assertion is dangerous. In doing so, they throw the baby out with the bathwater. Anger is not inherently evil. It is an evolutionary tool with dual potential, to destroy or to defend. Without it, they lack the defense mechanism critical for survival in the face of tyranny. If you have the means to strike, but don't, it doesn't increase the likelihood you'll have to. In fact, the opposite is true. Assert your boundaries early and clearly, and your oppressor's capacity to exploit is curtailed. Tyranny fills the space in which resistance is not offered. Naive individuals often believe in axioms such as people are basically good, or violence is always immoral. But against malevolence, those axioms become invitations to abuse. In therapy, I often guide clients through a mini-awakening. They learn to label resentment as justified anger and to recognize the moral responsibility to respond, to speak or act. Doing so doesn't just protect them, it fortifies the social order against corruption. Such realizations can be shocking. New soldiers frequently suffer post-traumatic stress not from what was done to them, but from what they realize they have done. They may assume the perpetrators of history's horrors were fundamentally different, only to uncover the same capacity within themselves. That awareness, though disconcerting, instills humility. It helps them anchor themselves. I can be terrible, I can be strong, and I can stand. Perhaps then, you find yourself labeled a loser. Perhaps you embody certain negative habits and postures that's not immutable. Even if your identity was forged in suffering or subjugation, maturity and shifting contexts mean transformation is possible. If you collapse into a posture of defeat, the ancient dominance calibrating systems of your brain interpret your posture as status, and thus your biochemistry responds accordingly. Your serotonin dips. Anxiety and depression rise, opportunity fades, but posture and demeanor can catalyze reversal. Sitting up straight invites confidence, walking with purpose invites opportunity. Positive feedback loops operate both ways. Remarkably, our emotional state is partially shaped by our physical expression. Adopting a sad face, even intentionally, makes us feel sadder. Holding a happy expression happier. Our posture tells others and ourselves who we are. Slumped shoulders invite sorrow. An upright stance invites presence. If you're at the bottom rung, you may argue that standing tall simply draws predatory attention. True, but rejecting posture is not only physical, it's existential. To stand is to engage with being, to accept responsibility, to transform chaos into order. To stand tall with your shoulders back signals you are prepared to meet life's demands, not as a cowering victim, but as an architect of order. It means evolving from passive entrenchment to active defense. It means building your ark, guiding your people, or simply speaking when silence serves no one. It is to recognize that standing tall is both a practical act and a metaphysical one. It is the voluntary assumption of vulnerability and purpose. Attend to your posture, stand up, speak truth, harbor ambition. Allow serotonin in its rightful flow. Others will perceive you differently, as capable, as stable, as someone worthy of attention and respect. That invites conversation, connection, and opportunity. You become part of life's positive feedback. Good things may follow, and they will feel more authentic when they do. Once emboldened, you may find yourself able to stand firm in Christ's illness, loss, suffering, and offer strength to others drowning in despair. You may illuminate the hilltop and pursue your destiny with courage. In doing so, the meaning of your life may become a force resilient enough to resist despair. You may then embrace the burden of existence and discover joy in the courage of being. So look to the steadfast lobster surviving in earthly seas for 350 million years, its posture the product of ancient determination. Attend to your bearing, stand up straight, shoulders back.